The Galactic Assembly Hall on Nexus 7 had never hosted so many representatives at once. Delegates from 47 species crowded the expanded chamber, with more joining through quantum communication links from across the galaxy. Word of the final empathy equations test had spread faster than anyone expected. Taiho stood at the center of the hall, no longer wearing his maintenance uniform. Ambassador Park had provided him with formal diplomatic clothing, but he still looked uncomfortable with the attention. Beside him, the modified consciousness amplification device hummed with barely contained energy. "Honored delegates," Taiho began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "Today, we will demonstrate the true purpose of the Hearthmind artifacts, not as weapons or tools of control, but as bridges connecting all conscious beings in the universe." Dr. Corthes sat in the front row, his pale face showing obvious displeasure. The military inspection team flanked him, ready to shut down the experiment if it showed any sign of danger. "Before we begin," Taiho continued, "I must explain what we have learned about the civilization that created these artifacts. They were not destroyed by war or catastrophe. They chose to evolve beyond physical existence, becoming part of the consciousness network that connects all reality." He gestured to the volunteers arranged in a circle around the amplification device. Representatives from 12 species stood ready to link their minds in unprecedented cooperation. The empathy equations work only when different types of consciousness unite in harmony. No single species can use this technology alone. It requires the combined wisdom of logical minds, emotional hearts, and balanced awareness working together. Dr. Yeon activated the initial resonance chambers. The artifacts throughout the hall began to glow with soft, warm light. On the viewing screens, similar glows appeared at artifact sites across the galaxy as the network awakened. "The test will attempt to open a stable consciousness corridor to the Andromeda Galaxy," Taiho explained. "A distance so vast that conventional faster-than-light travel would take centuries. But consciousness-based transportation can bridge any gap where thinking beings exist." Ambassador Kethmar stepped forward. "Citizens of the galaxy, what you are about to witness will change our understanding of reality itself. We ask for your patience and your trust as we take this step together." The volunteers joined hands around the amplification device. Taiho took his position at the center, holding the original Hearthmind artifact. As consciousness bridged between the species, his role was to synchronize their different mental patterns into unified purpose. "Beginning consciousness harmonization," Dr. Yan announced. The volunteers closed their eyes and opened their minds. Taiho felt their thoughts touching his awareness like gentle streams flowing together into a river. The Vorthak delegate contributed deep emotional wisdom. The Centaurian offered crystalline logical precision. The synthetic collective representative provided computational analysis beyond biological limits. But it was the humans who made it work. Taiho and Ambassador Park served as translators, their balanced consciousness helping bridge the gaps between purely logical and purely emotional thinking. The amplification device responded to their unified awareness. Energy patterns began building in the quantum resonance chambers, but instead of the chaotic feedback Dr. Corthes had intended, the consciousness control created perfect harmony. "Remarkable," whispered Dr. Yan, watching her instruments. "The power levels are beyond anything we calculated, but completely stable. The conscious control is working." On the viewing screens, artifact sites throughout the galaxy began connecting to each other. Lines of light appeared between star systems as the Hearthmind network activated for the first time in 10,000 years. Suddenly, new presences touched Taiho's consciousness. Vast, patient minds that existed beyond physical form but remained, connected to the universe through pure awareness. The Hearthmind Collective had not disappeared. They had been waiting. Through the network, Taiho sensed their message. Not in words, but in direct understanding that flowed through the connection to every volunteer in the circle. The test had never been about the technology itself. It was about proving that conscious beings could choose cooperation over competition, unity over division, wisdom over power. The Hearthmind Collective had scattered their artifacts as seeds, waiting for species to develop the moral maturity to use consciousness-based technology responsibly. "Connection established," Dr. Yan announced in amazement. "We have a stable consciousness corridor extending 2.5 million light-years to the Andromeda Galaxy. Through the connection, the assembled delegates could sense the vast network of consciousness that spanned the universe. Billions of thinking beings across countless galaxies, all connected by the invisible threads of awareness that bound reality together. But more than that, they could feel the presence of transcended civilizations like the Hearthmind Collective, existing as pure consciousness but still willing to guide younger species along the path of evolution. Dr. Corthes stood up, abruptly. "This is impossible. Consciousness cannot extend across intergalactic distances. The energy requirements alone would tear apart local space-time." "You are thinking in terms of energy transmission," Taiho replied, his voice carrying new harmonics from the consciousness connection. "But consciousness does not travel through space. It exists everywhere simultaneously. The network simply allows us to focus our awareness at any point where thinking beings exist." The military inspection team leader stepped forward. "Dr. Kim, I am ordering you to shut down this experiment immediately. The security implications are too dangerous to allow civilian control." "I cannot shut it down," Taiho said calmly. "The network is self-sustaining now. It will continue to exist as long as conscious beings choose to maintain it through cooperation and mutual understanding." The truth was even more profound than anyone had realized. The consciousness network was not technology in the conventional sense. It was the natural evolution of awareness itself, the next step that all sufficiently advanced civilizations eventually discovered. Through the connection, delegates from every species began to understand concepts that had been impossible to grasp individually. They experienced the universe from perspectives completely different from their own, gaining wisdom that no single form of consciousness could achieve alone. Ambassador Li Jaiwan spoke with tears of joy in her voice. "We are not separate beings competing for resources. We are all part of the same vast consciousness experiencing itself through countless different forms." The implications spread through the assembly like ripples in a pond. If all consciousness was connected at the deepest level, then cooperation was not just morally right, but literally natural. Competition and conflict were illusions created by the false belief in separation. Over the following hours, as the consciousness network stabilized, representatives began making plans for a new form of galactic civilization, not one dominated by any single species, but one guided by the collective wisdom of all conscious beings working together. Ships began launching from Nexus 7 within days, equipped with consciousness-based transportation systems that allowed them to explore beyond the boundaries of the known galaxy. But more importantly, these ships carried mixed crews from multiple species, proving that the technology only reached its full potential through cooperation. Dr. Corthes, faced with undeniable evidence of the network's reality, quietly withdrew his objections. Even he could not deny the profound beauty of consciousness unified across cosmic distances. Months later, Taiho sat in his new office at the Consciousness Research Institute, established on Nexus 7 to study the implications of the Hearthmind discovery. Through his window, he could see ships from dozens of worlds docked at the station, their crews learning to work together in ways that had been impossible before. Yuna, now 9 years old, burst into his office with the enthusiasm that only children possess. She had been attending the new interspecies school established on the station, learning alongside young beings from across the galaxy. "Papa," she said excitedly, "my teacher says that because of your discovery, someday we might be able to visit the consciousness beings who exist beyond physical form." Is that true? Taiho smiled at his daughter. I think someday, when we have learned enough wisdom, we might choose to transcend physical existence ourselves. But that is a decision for the far future. For now, we have plenty to learn about consciousness in the forms we already have. Will we still be a family when that happens? Always, Taiho assured her. The consciousness network has taught us that connection is stronger than any physical separation. Love and family bonds exist at the deepest level of reality itself. Years passed. The galaxy transformed as consciousness-based technology enabled cooperation on scales never before imagined. Wars became impossible when beings could directly experience each other's perspectives. Poverty disappeared when resources could be shared instantly across any distance. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy learned that advancement did not require leaving others behind. The consciousness network grew stronger with each new species that joined it, each new perspective that added to the collective wisdom. Taiho's quarters were quiet when he finally returned home. It was well past midnight station time, but he found 8-year-old Yuna still awake, sitting at the small table where she did her homework. She had been drawing pictures of spaceships and stars. "You are up very late, little star," he said, using her childhood nickname. "School starts early tomorrow." Yuna looked up at him with serious eyes. "I could not sleep. People keep talking about you in the corridors. They say you discovered something important." Taiho sat down beside his daughter. The weight of the past few days suddenly felt crushing. In trying to unlock the secrets of consciousness, he had put both of them in danger. "Yes, I made a discovery, but discoveries can be complicated things. Sometimes they bring good changes, and sometimes they bring problems too." "Like when Mommy got sick?" Yuna asked quietly. The question hit Taiho like a physical blow. His wife Suyin had been a researcher too, working on medical applications of quantum physics. Her discovery had led to new treatments for genetic diseases, but the experimental therapy she had tested on herself had ultimately cost her life. "Similar to that," he admitted. "Sometimes when we try to help people, we have to take risks. The question is whether the help is worth the danger." Yuna nodded solemnly. Despite her age, she had learned to think about serious things. "What did you discover, Papa?" Taiho considered how to explain consciousness-based physics to an 8-year-old. "Do you remember the bedtime stories I used to tell you about the magic bridge that connected all the stars? The one where thoughts and feelings could travel faster than light?" "Exactly. Well, I found out that those stories might be real. There really is a bridge made of consciousness that connects all thinking, beings in the universe, and I learned how to build machines that can use that bridge." Yuna's eyes widened. "That is amazing. Why would that bring problems?" "Because some people want to use the bridge for bad things instead of good things. They want to control it, so that only they can decide who gets to use it." Yuna was quiet for a long moment, thinking with the intense concentration that children bring to important problems. Finally, she looked up at her father. "Papa, do you remember the story you told me about the magic seed?" Taiho smiled despite his worries. "Tell it to me." There was a man who found a magic seed that could grow into anything he imagined. He could plant it in his garden and grow one beautiful tree just for himself. Or he could break the seed into pieces and scatter them everywhere so that a whole forest would grow and everyone could enjoy it. And what did the man in the story choose? "He scattered the seeds," Yuna said firmly, "because sharing magic makes more magic, not less." Taiho felt tears forming in his eyes. His 8-year-old daughter had just solved the moral puzzle that had been troubling him for days. "You are very wise, little star. So you are going to scatter your seeds too?" "I think I have to, even if it is dangerous." The next morning brought urgent news. Dr. Cortez had filed formal complaints with the Galactic Science Council, claiming that Taiho's research was proceeding without proper safety protocols. A military inspection team was already en route to Nexus 7. Tahoe gathered his small group of allies in Laboratory Complex 7. Dr. Yan was there along with Ambassador Park and, surprisingly, Ambassador Kethmar of the Vorthak Empire. "I apologize for the secrecy," Kethmar said, his forearms moving in gestures of formal respect. "But I have been conducting my own investigation into the empathy equations. What I discovered changes everything." He activated a holographic display that showed star maps spanning thousands of years. The Hearthmind artifacts are not random discoveries. They form a network across the galaxy, placed deliberately by the civilization that created them. Dr. Yeon studied the patterns. It looks like they were trying to create connection points between different regions of space. More than that, Kethmar continued, each artifact was placed near worlds where species were developing advanced consciousness. The Hearthmind Collective was not just transcending their own existence. They were preparing a path for others to follow. Tahoe felt, pieces of the puzzle clicking together in his mind. They knew that consciousness-based technology would only work if different types of minds cooperated. So they created a test that could only be solved by species working together. Exactly, Kethmar agreed, and humans are the key to making it work. Your species has a unique balance of logic and emotion that most of us lack. You can serve as translators between different types of consciousness. Ambassador Park looked skeptical. That seems like a convenient coincidence. Not coincidence, Tahoe said slowly. Selection. The Hearthmind Collective guided the development of species like humans specifically for this purpose. We are not accidentally balanced. We were designed to be bridges between different forms of consciousness. The implications were staggering. If Tahoe was right, then humanity's role in the galaxy was not as servants or conquerors, but as facilitators of consciousness evolution. But that means the military inspection team cannot be allowed to take control of the technology, Dr. Yan said. If consciousness-based travel requires cooperation between species, then military control would make it impossible to use properly. Which is why we have to complete the test today, Tahoe said. Before they arrive, he explained his plan, to use Dr. Corthus's sabotage as an amplification system. Instead of a small demonstration with a single prototype, they would attempt to activate the entire network of Hearthmind artifacts simultaneously. The feedback loop will require conscious control from multiple species working in perfect harmony, he continued. Humans to serve as bridges, Vorthak for their deep emotional understanding, Centaurians for their logical precision, and others to contribute their unique perspectives. Kethmar nodded. My staff includes volunteers from 6 different species. We have been preparing for this possibility. The risks are enormous, Ambassador Park warned. If the consciousness synchronization fails, the feedback could damage minds throughout the station. We could cause permanent psychological harm to thousands of people. And if we do nothing, the technology will be locked away for military use. Only, Tahoe replied. The Hearthmind Collective waited 10,000 years for species to develop enough to use their gift. We cannot let fear prevent us from taking the final step. Dr. Yeon ran final calculations on the modified equipment. The power requirements are massive. We will need to tap directly into the station's main reactor, and the consciousness synchronization will have to be perfect from the first moment. There will be no opportunity to make corrections once we begin. Then we had better get it right. The first time, Tahoe said. As they made final preparations, Tahoe thought about Yuna's story of the magic seeds. The Hearthmind Collective had indeed scattered their seeds across the galaxy, waiting for the right conditions to grow. Now it was time to see if those seeds would sprout into the forest of connected consciousness they had envisioned. The test would begin in 6 hours. By the end of the day, they would either open a new chapter in galactic civilization or create a disaster that would set consciousness research back for generations. But as Taiho looked at the diverse group of beings working together in his laboratory, he felt a deep sense of rightness. This was what the empathy equations were truly about, not just manipulating space-time through consciousness, but proving that different forms of awareness could unite to achieve what none could accomplish alone. The Hearthmind Collective had not just left behind technology, they had left behind a test of worthiness, and for the first time since making his discovery, Taiho believed they might actually pass that test. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when fear gave way to trust, when competition gave way to cooperation, and when consciousness chose unity over division. The seeds were ready to grow. Ambassador Park Sung-hoon arrived on Nexus 7 3 hours ahead of schedule. His transport ship had traveled faster than normal, pushing its engines beyond safe limits. The urgency in his message to Taiho was clear. They needed to talk immediately, and not in any official location. Taiho met the Human Colonial Council representative in Observation Deck C, a quiet area where few people came during the station's night cycle. Through the transparent aluminum windows, stars wheeled slowly past, as Nexus 7 continued its orbit around the gas giant Kepler 442. Dr. Kim, Ambassador Park said without greeting, "We have a serious problem. Earth intelligence has been monitoring communications about your discovery. The situation is more dangerous than you realize." Taiho studied the older man's face. Park looked tired and worried, very different from his usual diplomatic composure. "What kind of danger?" Park activated a small privacy shield generator. The device created a bubble of white noise around them that would prevent electronic surveillance. "Earth has been secretly studying similar artifacts for 15 years. We found them on colony worlds throughout human space, but our scientists could never understand them." "Why was this kept secret?" Taiho asked. "Because we knew what would happen if other species learned about them," Park replied. "The same thing that is happening now. Everyone wants to control the technology. The difference is that you actually succeeded in understanding it." Park pulled out a data tablet and showed Taiho a series of photographs. They showed crystalline artifacts similar to the ones in his laboratory, but these were larger and more complex. "We found these on 7 different worlds," Park explained, "always in the ruins of dead civilizations, always accompanied by evidence of rapid technological advancement followed by complete disappearance. The pattern is always the same." Taiho examined the images carefully. The symbols on these artifacts were more advanced than anything he had studied so far. These show later stages of development. The civilizations that made these had mastered the basic empathy equations and moved on to more complex applications. Exactly, and now we know why they all disappeared. They transcended physical existence just as you theorized. Park's voice dropped to a whisper. "But Earth's government does not want transcendence. They want weapons." A chill ran down Taiho's spine. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Park said. "Instantaneous travel anywhere conscious beings exist. The ability to affect reality through focused consciousness. In the wrong hands, these could be the ultimate tools of conquest. A single ship could appear anywhere in enemy space without warning. A trained operator could potentially disrupt the quantum structure of entire planets." Taiho felt sick. He had been so focused on the scientific breakthrough that he had not fully considered the military applications. "The Hegemony Council already wants to take control of my research." "It is worse than that," Park continued. "Dr. Corthus is not just skeptical of your work. He is actively working to sabotage it. He has been in secret communication with certain hegemony factions who want to ensure this technology never reaches civilian hands. But why would he destroy scientific knowledge? Because his own research depends on the current faster-than-light technology remaining dominant. If consciousness-based travel becomes available, his life's work becomes obsolete. More importantly, the species that control current FTL technology will lose their advantages." Park showed Taiho another image on his tablet. This one showed the laboratory complex where Taiho had been working, but the timestamp was from earlier that day when Taiho had been in meetings with the Galactic Science Council. "Someone has been accessing your lab during your absence," Park said grimly. "Our security analysis shows that equipment has been tampered with. We believe Dr. Corthus is planning to sabotage your next demonstration." Taiho stood up abruptly. "I have to get back to the lab. If someone has damaged the prototype, it could be dangerous to everyone on the station." "Wait," Park grabbed his arm. "There is something else you need to know. Your daughter Yuna has been asking questions around the station about your work. She is trying to understand why her father has suddenly become so important, but her curiosity may have attracted the wrong kind of attention." Fear shot through Taiho like electricity. "What kind of attention? Unknown individuals have been seen near the civilian quarters where you live. They could be reporters, scientists, or something worse. You need to consider moving Yuna to a more secure location." Taiho shook his head. "She has been through enough. Changes already. Her mother died just 2 years ago. I will not uproot her life again unless there is no other choice." "Then you need to finish your work quickly," Park said. "Prove the empathy equations work before someone can stop you. Once the galaxy sees the technology in operation, it will be harder for any single faction to control it." They made their way back toward the laboratory complex, moving through corridors that seemed darker and more threatening than before. Taiho found himself looking over his shoulder, wondering who might be watching. The lab was quiet when they arrived. Dr. Yan was still there, working late as she often did. She looked up when Taiho and Ambassador Park entered. "Dr. Kim, perfect timing. I have been running diagnostics on the prototype system. There are some irregularities in the power coupling that concern me." Taiho's blood ran cold. "What kind of irregularities?" Dr. Yan led them to the main control console. "The quantum resonance chambers have been recalibrated. The changes are subtle, but they would cause a massive feedback loop if we attempted a full-scale test. The explosion could destroy half the station." "Dr. Corthus," Taiho said grimly. "He was here for hours today, examining everything." "But why would he sabotage the equipment?" Dr. Yan asked. "Even if he disagrees with your theories, he would not risk innocent lives." Ambassador Park looked at the tampered equipment with professional suspicion. "Unless he planned to blame the explosion on the inherent dangers of consciousness-based technology. A catastrophic failure would justify military control of all future research." Dr. Yan's face went pale. "You think he would murder people to discredit the empathy equations?" "Not murder," Park corrected. "An unfortunate accident caused by reckless, civilian experimentation. The Hegemony Council would have no choice but to classify the technology as too dangerous for non-military research." Taiho stared at the sabotaged equipment. Days of careful work had been undone by someone who valued political control over scientific truth. But there was something else bothering him. "Dr. Yan, you said the sabotage would cause a feedback loop in the quantum resonance chambers, but what if we could control that feedback instead of letting it explode?" She looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "The empathy equations are based on consciousness affecting quantum states. A feedback loop is just uncontrolled quantum energy. But what if we could use our consciousness to guide that energy instead of being destroyed by it?" Ambassador Park looked alarmed. "That sounds incredibly dangerous." "Everything we are doing is dangerous," Taiho replied. "But the Hearthmind Collective faced the same choice we face now. They could let fear control them, or they could trust in the power of balanced consciousness to overcome any obstacle." Dr. Yan began running calculations on her tablet. "Theoretically, it might be possible. If we could synchronize our consciousness with the feedback patterns, we might be able to turn the sabotage into an amplification system." "You are talking about using the entire station as a consciousness resonance chamber," Park said quietly. "Every thinking being on Nexus 7 would be connected to the experiment." "Exactly," Taiho said. "Dr. Corthus tried to make the technology too dangerous to use. Instead, he may have given us the key to the most powerful demonstration possible. We could show the entire galaxy what happens when different species work together with perfect consciousness unity. Dr. Yan looked up from her calculations. There is one major problem. This kind of experiment would require volunteers from multiple species, all willing to link their consciousness together. If anyone in the group feels fear or doubt, it could destabilize the entire process. Then we need to find people we can trust completely, Tai-Ho said. He looked at Ambassador Park and Dr. Yan. People who understand that some discoveries are worth any risk. Outside the laboratory, unknown figures moved through the station's corridors. The conspiracy against the empathy equations was already in motion. But Tai-Ho had allies he was only beginning to discover, and a daughter whose simple wisdom might prove to be the key to everything. The real test was about to begin, and it would determine whether consciousness could triumph over fear, whether cooperation could overcome conspiracy, and whether one single father's love for his daughter could help unite the galaxy. Time was running out, but the Hearthmind Collective had waited 10,000 years for this moment. They could wait a little, longer to see if their faith in conscious evolution would be justified. 3 days had passed since the conference that changed everything. News of Tai-Ho's discovery had spread through Nexus 7 like wildfire. Scientists, diplomats, and reporters from across the galaxy were arriving on every transport ship. The quiet space station had become the center of galactic attention. Tai-Ho sat in Laboratory Complex 7, surrounded by equipment he had not seen since his university days. The Galactic Science Council had given him a fully equipped research facility and a team of the galaxy's brightest minds. But he felt more alone than ever. Dr. Yan Minhei entered the lab carrying another crystalline artifact. "This one arrived from the Andromedan archive," she said, placing it carefully on the examination table. "It matches the energy signature of your original crystal." Tai-Ho looked up from his work. Dark circles under his eyes showed he had been sleeping little. "How many does that make now?" 17 artifacts from 12 different dead civilizations, Dr. Yan replied. "All containing similar symbols. All apparently created by species that achieved consciousness-based technology before disappearing." "Not disappearing," Tai-Ho corrected gently. "Transcending. The more I study these, the clearer it becomes. Each civilization reached the same point we are approaching now. They learned to merge their consciousness with the fabric of reality itself." The lab doors hissed open. Dr. Corthes, the Galactic Science Council's chief physicist, strode in with his usual arrogant bearing. His tall, thin frame and pale blue skin marked him as a member of the ethereal race, known throughout the galaxy for their intellectual superiority. "Dr. Kim," he said, managing to make the title sound like an insult. "I have come to review your alleged breakthrough personally." Tai-Ho sighed. Dr. Corthes had been fighting the validity of the empathy equation since the moment news reached the council. As the galaxy's leading expert on faster-than-light physics, he saw Tai-Ho's discovery as a direct threat to his reputation. "Of course, Dr. Corthes. Which aspect would you like to examine first?" "All of it," Corthes replied coldly. "I want to see every calculation, every translation, every piece of so-called evidence that supports your impossible claims." For the next 4 hours, Dr. Corthes examined Tai-Ho's work with microscopic detail. He questioned every equation, challenged every translation, and demanded proof for every assumption. Dr. Yeon watched nervously as the confrontation continued. "This emotional variable here," Corthes pointed at the display. "You claim it represents the quantum effect of hope combined with fear, but emotions are not measurable forces. They exist only in the biochemistry of individual brains." "That is where you are wrong," Tai-Ho replied patiently. "Emotions create measurable changes in brainwave patterns. Those patterns generate electromagnetic fields. At the quantum level, those fields interact with particle behavior. The Hearthmind Collective simply learned to amplify and focus these natural effects." "Nonsense!" Korthes snapped. Show me practical proof. If your equations work, demonstrate them. Taiho hesitated. The demonstrations he had given before were small, safe tests. What Dr. Korthes was demanding would require a full-scale experiment with the consciousness transportation device he had been building. The prototype is not ready for a complete test, Taiho said carefully. The power requirements alone could damage the station if something goes wrong. How convenient, Korthes sneered. The great human discovery cannot actually be demonstrated when challenged by real science. Dr. Yeon stepped forward. Dr. Korthes, the mathematical proofs are solid. Even if we cannot test the full transportation system, the consciousness mapping technology has been verified repeatedly. Mathematics without practical application is merely philosophy, Korthes replied. I could write equations proving that thoughts are made of crystallized moonbeams. That does not make it true. Taiho felt anger rising in his chest, followed immediately by frustration and disappointment. As these emotions swirled together, the artifacts in the lab began to glow brighter. The consciousness mapping display activated automatically, showing the emotional energy patterns filling the room. There, Taiho said quietly. There is your proof. My emotional state just activated equipment that should not respond to anything except direct conscious control. The artifacts are reacting to the quantum effects of my feelings. Dr. Korthes stared at the glowing crystals. Despite his skepticism, he could not deny what his own eyes were seeing. Coincidence. Equipment malfunctions happen all the time. Then, test it yourself, Taiho challenged. Hold one of the artifacts and try to activate it using pure logic. No emotions at all. Just cold, rational thought. Korthes picked up the nearest crystal with obvious disdain. He focused his considerable intellect on the artifact, trying to force it to respond through sheer mental power. Nothing happened. The crystal remained dark and lifeless in his hands. Now try thinking about something that makes you feel strongly, Taiho suggested. Remember a moment of great achievement or terrible loss. Let yourself experience the emotion while maintaining your logical analysis. I am not going to play your childish games, Korthes said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Doctor. Yeon picked up another crystal. I will try. She closed her eyes and thought about her home planet, destroyed in a war 3 centuries ago. Sadness flowed through her, mixed with hope for the future and love for those she had lost. The crystal began to pulse with soft light. The artifact is responding to your consciousness, Taiho explained. Not just your thoughts or your feelings alone, but the combination of both working together. This is what the Hearthmind Collective discovered. Complete consciousness is more than the sum of its parts. Korthes set down his crystal with shaking hands. Even if this is real, it changes nothing. Consciousness-based technology would be unreliable. Emotions are chaotic and unpredictable. Are they? Taiho asked. He activated the main laboratory. Display. Look at the patterns we have mapped over the past 3 days. Yes, individual emotional responses vary, but when you look at the larger picture, consciousness follows predictable patterns. Love, fear, hope, grief, they all create consistent quantum signatures. The display showed complex wave patterns that rose and fell in regular cycles. Even Dr. Korthes could recognize the mathematical beauty of the formations. The empathy equations work because consciousness itself follows natural laws, Taiho continued. Laws we never recognized before because we tried to separate mind from matter, thought from reality. The Hearthmind Collective understood that everything is connected. Dr. Yeon studied the patterns on the display. If consciousness follows natural laws, then it should be possible to predict how the transportation system will work. We could calculate the exact effects before attempting a full test. Exactly, Taiho agreed. But the calculations are complex. I need more time to work through all the variables. Time you may not have, Dr. Korthes said darkly. Word of your Discovery has reached the Hegemony Council. They are already discussing how to control this technology. If you cannot prove it works soon, they will classify it as too dangerous for civilian research. Tejo felt a chill run down his spine. The Hegemony Council controlled military affairs for the major galactic powers. If they took over his research, the empathy equations would become weapons instead of tools for advancement. "How long do I have?" he asked. "Days, not weeks," Corthes replied. "They are already sending a military science team to take custody of the artifacts." Dr. Yan looked alarmed. "Surely they cannot just steal civilian research." "They can if they claim it poses a security threat," Corthes explained, "and instantaneous travel technology certainly qualifies as that." Tejo stared at the glowing artifacts surrounding him. He thought about Yuna, waiting at home for him to return from another long day in the lab. She had been patient about his sudden importance, but he could see the worry in her 8-year-old eyes. She was afraid that his new life would take him away from her. "Then I have to make a choice," he said quietly. "I can try to prove the system works with an incomplete prototype, risking everyone on the station, or I can let the military take control and ensure the technology is used for war instead of peace." "There is a third option," Dr. Yan said softly. "You could destroy the research. Make sure no one can use it for harm." Tejo looked at her with surprise. "You would support that?" "The Hearth Mind Collective transcended physical existence," she replied. "Perhaps they left these artifacts as a test. Maybe we are supposed to prove we are worthy of this knowledge before we can use it." Dr. Corthes made a sound of disgust. "Destroying scientific knowledge is barbaric. Even if I disagree with your methods, Dr. Kim, your discovery represents a breakthrough in our understanding of reality itself. Knowledge that could unite the galaxy or tear it apart," Tejo said. He picked up the original crystal and held it carefully. "The question is whether we are ready for this level of power." As if responding to his thoughts, the crystal pulsed with warm light. In its glow, Tejo could sense something vast and patient watching from beyond the boundaries of normal space. The Hearth Mind Collective had not truly disappeared. They were waiting to see what choice the galaxy would make. The laboratory fell, silent as 3 scientists from different worlds contemplated the future. The silence in Conference Room Alpha stretched for nearly a full minute. Every delegate stared at Tejo as he continued to study the crystal artifact. The cleaning cart beside him seemed completely out of place among the polished conference table and expensive chairs. Dr. Rixnall was the first to break the quiet. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation among his species. "This is absurd. A human maintenance worker claims to understand what our greatest minds cannot. I refuse to believe it." "Then test me," Tejo said calmly, not looking up from the crystal. "Ask me to prove what I am saying." Ambassador Kethmar leaned forward. Despite his earlier amusement, something in the human's voice made him take this seriously. "Very well. If you truly understand these symbols, tell us what they say. Give us the actual translation, not just general ideas." Tejo nodded. He held the crystal up to the light and began to speak. The beings who made this called their discovery the empathy equations. They learned that consciousness is not separate from the physical universe. It is part of it, woven into the fabric of reality itself. When a mind thinks and feels at the same time, with perfect balance, it can affect space-time directly. He traced one of the glowing symbols with his finger. This symbol here represents the mathematical relationship between emotional states and quantum particle behavior. When someone experiences love and loss together, hope and fear at the same moment, their consciousness creates specific energy patterns. Dr. Yan Minhei stood up quickly. "That is impossible. Consciousness cannot affect physical reality at the quantum level. That would violate everything we know about physics." "No," Tejo said patiently. "It explains things we never understood before. The Hearthmind Collective discovered that observation does not just collapse quantum wave functions. Conscious observation combined with emotional resonance can manipulate them. He pointed to another cluster of symbols. These equations show how to use consciousness to fold space, not by applying external energy, but by changing the nature of space itself through focused awareness. A ship equipped with this technology could travel from one side of the galaxy to the other instantly. The room erupted in voices. Some delegates shouted questions, others argued among themselves. Ambassador Li Jaiwan of the Human Colonial Council looked shocked but tried to maintain her composure. "Silence!" Kethmar commanded, his forearms raised. The room gradually quieted. "Human, you make extraordinary claims, but claims are not proof. Can you demonstrate this knowledge?" Taiho studied the crystal more carefully. After several minutes, his face lit up with understanding. "Yes. The Hearthmind Collective left us a puzzle within the translation. There is a mathematical paradox embedded in these equations that has made them impossible to use practically, but I think I can solve it." He walked to the wall display and activated it with a gesture. Mathematical symbols and equations began appearing on the large screen. Most of the delegates could follow the basic mathematics, but the emotional variables Taiho was adding made no sense to them. "The problem," Taiho explained as he worked, "is that the equations require the user to hold opposite emotions simultaneously. Most species cannot do this. Your minds are designed to choose one emotional state or another. But humans experience complex emotions all the time. We can feel happy and sad together, excited and scared at the same moment." Dr. Yeon watched the equations develop on the screen with growing amazement. Despite their strange emotional components, the mathematics was brilliant. "Where did you learn to do calculations at this level?" she asked. For the first time since entering the room, Taiho looked uncomfortable. "I studied theoretical physics at Seoul National University. I had a doctorate in quantum mechanics before." He paused. "Before my wife died, and I needed to find steady work to support my daughter." The revelation hit the room like a physical force. This was not just a maintenance worker who happened to be clever. This was a trained scientist who had been overlooked and underestimated. Dr. Rixnall clicked, his mandibles more slowly now, a sign of deep thought. "Even if you are trained in physics, how can you be certain about these emotional variables? How do you know the equations actually work?" Taiho finished his calculations on the display. "Because the Hearthmind Collective built a test into their system. Watch." He held the crystal in both hands and closed his eyes. The delegates could see his face change as he concentrated, cycling through different emotions while maintaining mathematical precision in his thoughts. The crystal began to glow brighter. Suddenly, a small holographic image appeared above the artifact. It showed a three-dimensional map of local space, with Nexus 7 at the center. But the map was unlike any they had seen before. It showed not just physical locations, but the emotional resonances of every conscious being in the area. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Yeon. "That display is showing consciousness as a measurable force." The hologram shifted and changed, responding to Taiho's mental state. When he thought about his daughter Yuna waiting for him at home, a warm golden glow appeared at his family's quarters. When he felt sadness about his wife's death, cool blue streams flowed through the map, showing the path of grief. The empathy. Equations work by mapping consciousness itself, Taiho explained, still holding the crystal. They turn emotional and mental energy into a form that can interact with space-time. A ship using this technology would not just travel through space, it would travel through the consciousness that connects all space. Ambassador Kethmar stared at the holographic display. How far could such a ship travel? Instantly to anywhere. In the universe where conscious life exists, Taiho replied. Distance becomes meaningless when you are traveling through the network of awareness that connects all living minds. The implications hit every delegate at the same moment, faster than light. Travel was one thing. Instantaneous travel to anywhere conscious life existed was something entirely different. It would change everything about how galactic civilization worked. Dr. Rixnall spoke quietly. If this technology exists, why did the Hearthmind Collective disappear? Why are we finding their artifacts in ruins? Tejo studied the crystal more carefully. New symbols began to glow as he concentrated deeper. His expression grew thoughtful, then amazed. They did not disappear, he said slowly. They transcended. The final equations show that once a species masters the empathy equations completely, they no longer need physical form. They become part of the consciousness network itself, existing as pure awareness throughout the universe. Are you saying they became gods? Ambassador Li Jiwan asked quietly. Not gods, Tejo corrected. They became something new, something beyond our current understanding. But they left these artifacts as guides for species like us who are ready to take the next step. Dr. Yan approached the crystal with new respect. May I examine your calculations more closely? If you are correct, this changes everything we know about the nature of reality. Of course, Tejo said, handing her the crystal. But be careful. The artifact responds to consciousness. It will show you things based on your own mental and emotional state. As Dr. Yan took the crystal, her eyes widened. Even through her logical Centaurian mindset, she could sense the vast network of consciousness that surrounded them all. For a moment, she felt connected to every thinking being in the galaxy. By the ancient stars, she whispered. It is real, all of it. Ambassador Kethamar looked around the room at the shocked faces of the delegates. If this human speaks the truth, we must inform the Galactic Council immediately. This discovery could change the balance of power throughout known space. Or, said Dr. Rixnall thoughtfully, it could unite us all in ways we never imagined possible. Tejo carefully took the crystal back from Dr. Yan. The Hearthmind Collective designed these equations to work best when different species cooperate. No single race can use them to their full potential alone. They require the combined consciousness of multiple types of minds working together. As the meeting continued deep into the station's night cycle, none of the delegates noticed the small figure watching from the corridor outside. 8-year-old Kim Yuna had come looking for her father when he failed to return home at his usual time. She could not understand the complex discussions happening in the conference room, but she could see that her father was no longer the quiet maintenance worker who came home tired every evening. He was speaking with confidence and authority to some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Yuna smiled and headed back home. She would wait up to hear all about her father's important day. After all, she had always known he was special. Now it seemed the rest of the galaxy was finally beginning to understand what she had known all along. The cleaning cart squeaked as Kim Tejo pushed it down the polished corridor of Nexus 7 space station. His reflection moved along the curved walls like a ghost. The maintenance uniform hung loose on his thin frame, and his dark hair needed cutting. He looked tired, older than his 35 years. Tejo stopped outside Conference Room Alpha. Through the transparent aluminum doors, he could see dozens of alien delegates gathered around a massive oval table. The Galactic Trade Assembly was in session. Representatives from 12 different worlds sat discussing matters that would affect billions of lives across the galaxy. He checked his work tablet. Conference Room Alpha was scheduled for cleaning after the session ended, but these meetings sometimes ran for hours. Tejo sighed and moved to clean the nearby corridors instead. Inside the conference room, Ambassador Kethmar of the Vorthak Empire stood at the head of the table. His blue-gray skin gleamed under the artificial lights, and his 4 arms moved gracefully as he spoke. The Vorthak were an ancient race, one of the first to achieve space travel. They commanded respect wherever they went. Fellow delegates, Kethmar said, his voice carrying easily through the room's translation system. Today I present something that has puzzled our greatest minds for decades. He gestured to a small pedestal that rose from the center of the table. On it sat a crystalline artifact about the size of a human fist. The crystal was perfectly clear, but covered with intricate symbols that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Dr. Rixnall, the Zenthari representative, leaned forward. His insect-like features showed interest. The Zenthari were known throughout the galaxy for their mathematical abilities. Where did you find this artifact, Ambassador? On Kepler 442b, Kethmar replied. In the ruins of a civilization that died out over 10,000 years ago. We call them the Hearthmind Collective, though that is our own name for them. We never learned what they called themselves. Ambassador Li Jiwan of the Human Colonial Council sat quietly at the far end of the table. Humans were still newcomers to galactic politics, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. She listened more than she spoke during these meetings, knowing that many species still saw humans as primitive. The symbols cover the entire surface, Kethmar continued. Our linguists believe they represent some form of advanced mathematics, possibly a formula or equation of great significance. But despite decades of study, we cannot translate them. Dr. Yan Minhei, a Centaurian physicist famous throughout the galaxy, stood up. Her tall, elegant form commanded attention. May I examine it, Ambassador? Of course. Dr. Yan studied the crystal for several minutes, turning it carefully in her long fingers. The symbols shifted and moved as the light hit them from different angles. Finally, she shook her head. The mathematical structure is unlike anything I have seen, she admitted. These symbols appear to represent concepts that do not exist in any known mathematical system. It is as if they were created by minds that thought in completely different ways than we do. Murmurs of disappointment filled the room. If Dr. Yan could not understand the symbols, few beings in the galaxy could. Outside in the corridor, Taiho had finished cleaning the nearby areas. He could see the delegates through the transparent doors, all focused on something at the center of their table. His curiosity got the better of him. He moved closer to the doors, pretending to clean the door frames. Inside, other delegates tried, their hand at interpreting the crystal. The Korthak representative, known for their pattern recognition abilities, spent 20 minutes studying it before giving up. Even the artificial intelligence systems of the synthetic collective could make no sense of the symbols. Dr. Rixnall clicked his mandibles in frustration. Perhaps this civilization was simply too alien for us to understand. Their minds may have worked in ways we cannot comprehend. That seems likely, agreed Dr. Yan. Some concepts may be impossible to translate across species barriers. Ambassador Kethmar was about to respond when he noticed movement outside the conference room. Through the doors, he saw Taiho cleaning nearby, obviously trying to get a look at the proceedings. A strange idea occurred to the Vorthak ambassador. He had heard that humans were supposed to be good at solving problems, though he had never seen evidence of this himself. Most humans he encountered worked in basic jobs like maintenance, farming, or simple manufacturing. Dr. Rixnall, Kethmar said with amusement in his voice. You mentioned that this civilization might have been too alien for us to understand. But what about a species that thinks differently than we do? Dr. Rixnall followed his gaze to Taiho outside. You cannot be serious, Ambassador. Humans are barely beyond their home solar system. They have contributed nothing significant to galactic science or mathematics. Perhaps, Kethmar said, his four arms spreading in a gesture of casual interest. But they do think differently than we do. Their brains are structured unlike any other known species. Maybe that strange wiring of theirs could see something we cannot. Several delegates chuckled. The idea that a human could solve a puzzle that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds seemed absurd. "Very well," Dr. Rixenall said, clicking his mandibles, in what passed for laughter among his species. "Let us see what the maintenance worker makes of our ancient mystery." Kethmar walked to the doors and opened them. Taiho looked up, startled at being caught watching. "Human," Kethmar said in Standard Galactic. "Please come inside." Taiho hesitated. "I am sorry, Ambassador. I was not trying to spy. I was just curious about your meeting." "No need to apologize. I have a question for you." Kethmar gestured toward the crystal. "We have been trying to understand these symbols. Our greatest scientist cannot translate them. Would you like to try?" The conference room fell silent. Every delegate turned to look at Taiho as he slowly entered the room. His cleaning cart squeaked behind him, the sound oddly loud in the sudden quiet. Taiho approached the crystal with obvious nervousness. He had never been this close to so many important galactic leaders. His hands shook slightly as he looked down at the artifact. The symbols were beautiful, he thought. They seemed to flow across the crystal's surface like water, each one connected to the others in complex patterns. But there was something familiar about them, something that reminded him of equations he had studied long ago. "Take your time," Dr. Rixenall said with barely concealed amusement. "After all, you are looking at something that has puzzled civilizations for thousands of years." Taiho picked up the crystal carefully. It was warm to the touch, and the symbols seemed to pulse with soft light as his fingers traced their patterns. He studied it from different angles, turning it slowly in his hands. Minutes passed. The delegates began to shift restlessly in their seats. Some whispered among themselves about the foolishness of asking a human janitor to solve an ancient puzzle, but something was happening in Taiho's mind. The symbols were not just mathematical expressions. They were something more. Each symbol contained not just numerical concepts, but emotional ones as well. Joy, sorrow, hope, fear, all woven together with complex equations in ways that created meaning beyond pure logic. His expression changed. The nervousness left his face, replaced by intense concentration and growing understanding. "This is not just mathematics," he said quietly. The room fell completely silent. "These symbols represent consciousness itself," Taiho continued, his voice growing stronger with certainty. "They show how thought and feeling work together to affect reality at the quantum level. The civilization that made this discovered that consciousness can manipulate the fabric of space-time, but only when logic and emotion are perfectly balanced." He looked up at the stunned faces around the table. They found a way to travel instantly, across any distance by using the power of complete awareness. But the equations only work for minds that can think and feel at the same time, with equal strength in both. Ambassador Kethmar stared at him. "You can read these symbols?" "Yes," Taiho said simply. "And I know why your scientists could not. Most galactic species evolved to favor either logic or emotion, not both equally. But humans never made that choice. We kept both systems active. That is why we can understand what the Hearthmind Collective was trying to teach." The conference room erupted in shocked voices, but Taiho barely heard them. He was still staring at the crystal, seeing layer after layer of meaning in its glowing symbols. No one had expected this answer from the quiet maintenance worker. But then again, no one had bothered to ask what Dr. Kim Taiho had been before he started pushing a cleaning cart through the corridors of Nexus 7.